So good morning, everyone. My name is Kyle, and I will be talking to you about my project, which is looking at the development of aspen container stock for use in reclamation. So a little bit of background on the project. Aspen is considered to be an important species in our mixed wood forests. It's considered to be a keystone species for reclamation since it's a species found in early successional stages of many different ecosystems and is used heavily for revegetation, particularly in forestry. However, there are challenges to establishing aspen seedlings in reclamation sites since the pre-existing vegetation that is found there often prohibits seedlings from collecting resources such as light, water, and other types of nutrients.
Treading with down arrow. Oh, there it goes.
So the focus of my research will be to look at the development of appropriate container stocks to allow aspen to be effectively used in reclamation. There's a need to test which container stocks would allow aspen to thrive in these highly competitive environments, since aspen is often planted in reclamation sites that often subject the seedlings to harsh conditions that often result in stunted growth or mortality. So my research will be looking at the success of different stock types in which aspen are kept in, and these will be planted across different field treatments. One being a site where plastic mulch is laid down to suppress other plants from growing, one where a site is plowed to remove the pre-existing vegetation, and a third site where grasses have already been planted. So the different stock types essentially refer to seedlings which are grown in different container sizes and different dates in which a shoot growth inhibitor was applied to the seedlings within the greenhouses. The shoot growth inhibitor essentially stops the plants from growing vertically and allows the plants to grow more roots and develop more nutrient reserves. These seedlings will be planted across 3 different treatment types, as I previously mentioned, in 2 different sites. One being in Peace River and the other being an agricultural site northeast of Edmonton to act as a control. And I will be looking at the physical measurements, the nutrient content, and the root development of these trees. Physical measurements were taken in the first year, and nutrient content and root development will be looked in the final year of the project. Physical measurements mostly being tree height and basal diameter. So there's a lot on this slide here, but the graph on the top left shows average heights for each of the stock types that were grown in a greenhouses prior to planting. The graph on the right shows the average height for each of the stock types that were planted in the agricultural site after a few months of growth. And then the 2 graphs on the bottom show nutrient content for the stem and root tissue of each of the stock types. Biggest thing to take away from this slide is the top 2 graphs show a similar shape, which shows that the stock types have different effects on tree growth. And however, in conjunction with that, the bottom 2 graphs don't show much variation, or significant variation at least, with nutrient content. So this kind of suggests that the stock type doesn't affect nutrient content of the tissue that much. So moving on to this graph, this shows average height of the trees after 1 growing season. The blue bars represent trees that were planted in the plastic mulch site. Gray bars represent trees that were planted in the grass site, and the green bars represent trees that were planted in the plowed site. Here we can see that trees that were planted in the plastic mulch site have the greatest growth within each of the stock type treatments. This is mostly because the plastic mulch helped to suppress competition from other species and allowed the aspen to grow. And another thing to take away from the graph is that treatment 5 has the greatest growth out of the 9 treatments, and this is the treatment that had the largest container size and allowed the seedlings to accumulate more nutrients since the seed inhibitor, or the shoot inhibitor was applied earlier. And just to hammer in the point of the plastic mulch, here we can see the average growth between each of the 9 treatments. Here we can clearly see that the blue bars are greater than the other 2 treatments, but here we can also see that there isn't much of a difference between the grass and the plowed treatments, despite the plowed treatment removing vegetation initially. And this is because despite vegetation being removed, as the season progressed, other weedy species were allowed to invade in the site, and thus inhibited aspen seedling throughout the summer. And that is my presentation.